audience are extremely welcome to Comic Connections, and we have an extraordinary programme to accompany Comics Unmasked around the corner. But secretly, I think we think tonight may be the highlight of the whole season. And not just this bit, but what's going to happen all over the building tonight. I suspect the exhibition doesn't need huge introduction. You've either seen it or you're about to see it, I hope. It's called not just Comics Unmasked, but Art and Anarchy in the UK, and there is great art and great anarchy under the roof of the British Library, I'm pleased to say. Tonight, its curators, two of them are with us tonight, Paul Gravett and John Harris-Dunning. I'll be handing over to them in a minute. They put the show together with my colleague here at the library, Adrian Edwards, our head of printed historical sources, which gives you a clue, I hope, about the range of the exhibition we've put together here at the library. Everything that human culture tries to print and produce, we try to collect. And the glorious tradition of graphic novels, comic art, dating back not just decades but centuries, is something we've always collected here, but until now we've perhaps not brought it centre stage and given it that scholarly, obsessive care and attention we love to give to everything else, and I hope we're remedying that with a vengeance this summer. So we've drawn extensively on our own collections here with some fantastic loans. Everything from an extraordinary 15th century illustrated apocalypse, possibly the first comic strip we have, right up to 20th century material, remarkable manuscripts, Kick-Ass, Viva Vendetta, Tank Girl, other 20th century and 21st century classics, and including, of course, fantastic exhibits from at least one of our speakers tonight. Accompanying that, directly after this, if you have the wristband, you are into Late at the Library, where we have an evening of celebration and performance around the exhibition. The artistic director of the exhibition, the great Dave McKean, is revealing his Renaissance skills by performing music as well. Also on stage will be Mark Almond performing, Alex Tucker, Pam Hoggins, guest DJ, and there'll be free entry to the exhibition there. That is to come, but for the next hour, hour and a half or so, our theme is Comic Connections. We have an encounter, I think a unique encounter, certainly here under this roof, and it's a wonderful one, between two very remarkable creative people. Tori Amos, who is wonderfully breaking on one of her rare nights off from her current European tour, will be here a little later, breaking from basking in the glory of the praise that's been heaped on Unrepentant Geraldine's, her new album, to reflect on other connections between music, comics, and other kinds of creativity. And her interlocutor and our first interviewee will be, of course, Neil Gaiman, who I think needs very little introduction for anyone who cares at all about the fantasy imagination in literature and on the page and in the brain and the heart of the great British tradition, seeing how it continues under the spells that he weaves, whether it's on the pages of Coraline or the screens of Doctor Who. My kids, I know, worship Neil and are thrilled that he's here tonight. But he is here tonight in remarkable circumstances, having just flown in from visiting the UNHCR refugee camps in Jordan, home to thousands of people from Syria at the moment. So the world of the imagination and the world of reality feed off each other all the time, and I'm sure that will be one of the themes tonight. It's wonderful to see you here tonight. Thank you for coming. I am going to hand over now to our two curators and two hosts for the evening, Paul Gravett and John Harris-Dunning, to take things from here. Thank you very much.
Please welcome Neil Gaiman. I'd like to have you here, and extraordinary circumstances, just in terms of the British Library, for one thing, doing so much for comics, which is perhaps a surprising thing to find.
We're definitely in the future that I hoped for.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember...
We've stormed the bastions. One of them, at least.
It's that peculiar feeling that we may have won. Now what? But,
Yes.
I mean, Paul and I have known each other now for about
Is it about
pushing 30 years.
It's about 30 years, yeah.
And he was actually more or less my first comics publisher.
Yeah, I wear that with pride, yes. Yes.
Right.
Almost, because you would have been Tremaine, Borderline,
Yeah,
which lived up to its name, before.
it was Borderline.
But that was your connecting place with McKean,
but
I think, wasn't it?
That was where Dave and I, we went to the offices of this Wimpole Street offices of this comic, which turned out to be a telephone sales company from which he'd been fired but still had the key so he could get it. And it was very, very
smooth, suited operator types there. This isn't very comics people.
It was very strange. But you came down, and you liked what I was writing, and you liked what Dave was drawing, and we came over to you and we said, and I think you said to us, would we like to do a 5-page strip for Escape?
Just a short, something short.
And we came back to
Escape magazine, actually.
For Escape magazine.
Yeah.
And we came back to you, that was Escape. And we came back about a week later and said, you know that 5-page strip you invited us to do, would you mind if it was a 48-page graphic novel?
What did you say to that? Obviously, no, don't do it. No, it has to be 5 pages. No, of course. It was wonderful.
You said yes.
But obviously something in that period had really gestated. The two of you and David, really hit it off. And things were clearly growing in a way that you hadn't expected, perhaps.
I think a lot of it was we both, there were comics that we wanted to show people that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And it was that thing where I'd realized that I would be talking to people about comics and they were not seeing what I was seeing in my head. As far as I was concerned, it was like comics was this huge shining city. I remember I was working as a journalist at the time. I was writing for a newspaper, a very short-lived newspaper called Today.
Which was soon yesterday.
Which was yesterday, incredibly quickly.
Yeah.
And I went to them, and I think it was them that I went to and said, I really want to do this. We've got Mouse, Dark Knight, and Watchmen all happening. I'm going to do a big piece on this thing. And they said, we can't. And I said, why not? They said, well, it was Desperate Dan's 50th birthday this year. We've already done our comics piece.
Yeah, we've done comics.
We've done comics. We've written about Desperate Dan. And I'm going, no, but there is this giant... And then
we're
I
talking about the battle being won. We're still battling that same battle, because it is the preset that you have to have the Beano, you have to go through the Beano to get beyond the Beano.
I mean, I think even with this show, I think what was quite interesting was obviously one of the challenges of it was to try and decide how to narrow down all of this incredible creativity. And I think the first thing we did was decide to focus on British creators. But then, that had to go down again, and we thought sort of rebellion and, and sedition, which immediately sort of cut a lot of that children's material out. And I think it's been really interesting when we've spoken to people about the exhibition, it's the first thing they say. So it's the kids, it's nostalgia.
Yeah.
But of course, it's not that anymore, and it hasn't been that for decades, really, but there is a sort of default.
Well, my taxi driver was saying to me, I used to read the Beano. I mean, if you said that, I once read Enlightenment. I haven't read a single book since, or I once watched a Disney film. I haven't watched a single film since. You'd be looked at as a laughing stock, wouldn't you? But people can say, I used to be the Beano, and that's the end of the conversation, Which is incredible, because you've missed out on so much. It's such a rich meaning. I never understood that.
I mean, I've always been fascinated by those conversations. And, being on American public radio in about 1990, promoting Good Omens, and having somebody say, so Neil, you're also you write comic books. I said, yes. So what do you think of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? I don't actually write those kind of comic books. I write comics for adults. And they go, oh, okay. But I suppose for me, the key yardstick from where we were and from where we are now is back then when I was a journalist, I talked the Sunday Times magazine into letting me do a giant feature on comics. And they were their editor said yes. And I went round and I got original Brian Bollandar There was some great, he was just working on Killing Joke. Frank Miller was almost finished Dark Knight, I think, and got some unpublished Dark Knight stuff, and I did interviews with Alan, with Frank, with Dave Gibbons, Dave Sim, the Hernandez brothers, and I handed this piece in, and I was so proud of it, and heard nothing. And finally, I let a week go by, and then I thought, this is very peculiar, and I phoned the Sunday Times, and I said, hello, this is Neil Gaiman, I sent in that article, and I said, right, yes. I'm afraid I read what you sent in, and I'm afraid I do have a bit of a problem with it. I said, well, what's the problem? And he said, well, I just don't think it really, I think it lacks balance. And I said, okay, well, whatever it is, I'm sure I can put it in. He said, well, I'm not sure you can. You see, these comics, you seem to think they're a good thing. And we immediately realized that the balance he needed could not be added by me. And they paid me actually the largest kill fee I'd ever received. You know, I would rather have had the article published and received nothing.
Interesting you mentioned the Sunday Times, and I will be provocative in saying we should all look at this Sunday Times, because our good friend Valdemar Janacek, does fantastic documentaries about the arts, etc., has written a review of the exhibition Comics Unmasked, over 2 pages, which is great. But there might be a need of balance.
Yes, so get tweets in.
Yeah, have a look at that. I mean, we don't know what it's going to say quite yet, but we gather it's going to need some. It may cause an interest. Actually, we want to cause a bit of a story. We don't want just to be